For 3 years, my daughter-in-law excluded me from family portraits because my silver hair and casual style didn't match their curated aesthetic. But when I discovered professional photo sessions had been happening behind my back, despite me being the family photographer for decades, I created a revolutionary portrait business that now employs 4 other invisible grandmothers, features my face cleverly hidden in all 237 of my artistic compositions, and has led to my work being displayed in galleries across 3 states, teaching my family that being 70-something doesn't make me unsightly, irrelevant, or ready to disappear from the frame of my own life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I never expected to become invisible at 73. For decades, I'd been the one capturing our family's precious moments, the birthdays, graduations, and holiday gatherings that built our visual history. Photography had been my passion since my late husband Gregory gave me my first serious camera on our 10th anniversary in 1982. "You see the world differently, Virginia," he'd said, wrapping the Nikon in my hands. "You notice the light and shadows the rest of us miss. My name is Virginia Holden. I raised 2 children, Michael and Cynthia, in our craftsman home in the lakeside town of Millbrook, where Gregory and I settled when he accepted a position at the regional hospital as chief of cardiology. Our house, with its wraparound porch and walls covered in family photographs that I'd taken and carefully framed over the years, had been the center of our family life for nearly 5 decades. Millbrook is a picturesque town nestled against Lake Champlain, where summer tourists arrive for boating while locals maintain tight-knit community connections. When Gregory and I first arrived in 1975, we were enchanted by the historic downtown with its century-old storefronts and the community's pride in its annual Lakeside Festival. Gregory was a dedicated physician, but also a true partner in our home life. His patients often stopped me at the grocery store to share stories of his compassionate care, his habit of explaining medical procedures with hand-drawn illustrations, or the way he remembered their children's names years after brief encounters. Taught high school literature for 15 years, then transitioned to the town library where I eventually became director, establishing Millbrook's first digital archive and photography collection. Throughout these professional chapters, photography remained my constant companion, initially a hobby, then a serious artistic pursuit that occasionally earned me local recognition through small exhibitions. Our son Michael followed his father into medicine, becoming an orthopedic surgeon who now practices in Burlington, about 40 minutes from Millbrook. He married Elise, a sleek interior designer whose Instagram-perfect home appears regularly in regional magazines. Their twin daughters, Sophia and Olivia, now 16, inherited their father's analytical mind and their mother's impeccable taste. While I've always felt a slight distance with Elise, her polite but somewhat detached manner creating an invisible barrier, I treasured my relationship with my granddaughters, teaching them photography basics when they were younger. Our daughter, Cynthia, took a different path, moving to Seattle after college and building a successful career in software development. Her visits home were less frequent, but always meaningful. She married later in life at 41 to Thomas, and they quickly adopted 2 children, Lucas, now 12, and Emma, 10. While the geographic distance made our relationship more challenging, Cynthia made efforts to maintain connection through weekly video calls and annual summer visits. Gregory passed away 4 years ago after a sudden stroke, the cruel irony of a heart doctor's heart failing without warning. The loss left me unmoored in the life we had built together. For months, I moved through our home like a ghost, touching the photographs that lined our walls, each image now both comfort and torment. Precious memories preserved, but no new ones to create together. "Mom, we're worried about you," Michael said during one of his visits about 6 months after Gregory's passing. "You're spending too much time alone with these old pictures. You need to engage with the present." "I'm fine," I assured him, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. Photography helps me process things. It gives me a way to see beauty again. In those early months of grief, photography became my lifeline. I began taking daily walks around Millbrook with my camera, capturing the changing seasons, architectural, details I'd never noticed, and portraits of willing neighbors. Something about being behind the camera again made me feel like myself, like I still had a perspective worth sharing, even as my identity as Gregory's wife had been stripped away. The Millbrook Arts Center noticed my renewed productivity and offered me a small exhibition, Reflections on Loss and Light, displaying 20 of my photographs exploring grief and healing through visual metaphor. The opening night brought unexpected support from the community and genuine interest in my work beyond sympathy for my circumstances. "These are extraordinary, Virginia," said Eleanor Mathies, the Arts Center director. "There's technical skill here." "Certainly, but more importantly, there's authentic emotion and a distinctive voice. Would you consider teaching a workshop for our summer program?" The invitation to teach reawakened something in me. Over the next 2 years, I developed photography, workshops for seniors, and began mentoring several serious hobbyists. My own work continued to evolve, focusing increasingly on environmental portraits that captured subjects in settings that revealed their passions. During this period of professional growth, my family relationships seemed stable, if not particularly close. Michael's family visited monthly for Sunday dinners, though Elise often found reasons to leave early. Cynthia's family made their annual summer pilgrimage, 2 weeks of reconnection that never felt quite long enough. I traveled to Seattle during Christmas, staying in a nearby hotel rather than their compact condo, capturing holiday memories that I would later print, frame, and send as gifts. Through it all, I remained the family photographer, the one who insisted on documenting gatherings, arranged group shots, and preserved the visual narrative of our changing family. It was a role I treasured, this ability to create tangible memories that would outlast all of us. The shift happened so gradually, I barely noticed it at first. During a Thanksgiving gathering at Michael and Elise's professionally decorated home, I reached for my camera as dessert was being served. "Oh, Mom, not now," Michael said quickly. "We're just about to start the movie." "Just one quick group shot," I insisted. "The light is perfect with the sunset coming through the dining room windows." Elise exchanged a glance with Sophia that I couldn't quite interpret. "We took plenty earlier," she said smoothly. "And honestly, I'm not looking my best after cooking. All day." I put my camera away, trying to ignore the subtle discomfort that had settled over the table. Later, scrolling through my memory card, I realized I hadn't actually captured any group photos that day, just candid shots of the twins and some food arrangements. Somehow, the family portrait I always took on holidays had been avoided. A similar pattern emerged at Christmas when we gathered at my house. As I set up the tripod in front of the fireplace, our traditional location for holiday portraits, Elise suggested we keep things casual this year. "The girls are at that age where posed photos are torture," she explained, guiding everyone toward the kitchen for dessert before I could protest. By Easter, when no one responded to my suggestion for a family picture on the front porch, I began to wonder if I was imagining things. Were they simply tired of my photography, or was something else happening? The answer came in June, when I stopped by Michael's house unexpectedly, bringing homemade cookies for the twins' birthday. As I entered the living room, I froze. Above the fireplace hung a large, professionally taken family portrait. Michael, Elise, Sophia, and Olivia, beautifully arranged in coordinated outfits against a rustic outdoor backdrop. "When did you have this done?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual while something cold settled in my stomach. "Oh, that." Michael looked momentarily uncomfortable. "Just something Elise arranged with a photographer from her magazine connections. Nothing special, but it was special. It was a formal family portrait, the very thing they had been avoiding when I suggested it. And I hadn't been included, or even informed it was happening." As I drove home, Fragments of conversations and subtle exclusions over the past year began assembling into a clearer picture. The holiday photos avoided, the casual gatherings that somehow never included formal group shots, the way Elise always seemed to direct family activities away from my planned photo sessions. When I arrived home, I went straight to my computer and opened social media, something I rarely explored beyond. Posting my own photography. On Elise's Instagram account, I discovered dozens of family photos I'd never seen: professional autumn portraits in a pumpkin patch, Christmas card photos in matching sweaters, even a multi-generational beach portrait from their vacation with Elise's parents. Not only had I been excluded from these photos, but I hadn't even known they were happening. The family photographer had been deemed unworthy of being in the family photographs, and apparently my style of photography was no longer considered good enough to document their lives. The realization was a physical pain, a sharp stab of rejection that took my breath away. For hours, I sat in Gregory's old reading chair, surrounded by the photographs that represented my life's work and passion, wondering how I had become so apparently unsuitable for the visual narrative of my own family. The next day, still raw, from the discovery, I received a text from Michael. Annual family beach day next Saturday at Lakeside Park, around 11. Casual. No need to bring camera. Elise hired someone to take some photos. The instruction, no need to bring camera, felt like a final dismissal. Not only was I unwanted in their photographs, but my skills as a photographer were now being replaced by hired professionals. Somehow I had become both visually and artistically irrelevant to the family I had helped create. That evening, I called my closest friend Martha, who had been my confidant through the decades of raising children, Gregory's death, and my subsequent reinvention as a photography teacher. "Have I missed something?" I asked her, voice breaking slightly as I recounted the discovery. When did I become someone they don't want to be seen with? Someone whose photography isn't good enough anymore? Martha was silent for a moment, then responded with her characteristic directness. "Virginia, this isn't about your photography skills, which are exceptional. This is about something uglier, the way our society makes older women invisible, especially when they don't fit certain aesthetic expectations." "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "Have you looked at Elise's social media? Really looked at it? Everything is perfectly curated. The right clothes, the right settings, the right filters. And I'm sorry to be blunt, but a 73-year-old grandmother in practical shoes and a hand-knit sweater doesn't fit that aesthetic, no matter how much your grandchildren love you." Her words stung with their potential truth. I had noticed Elise's increasing preoccupation with creating picture-perfect moments. Her home, her appearance, her children, everything precisely arranged for maximum visual appeal. Had I, with my silver hair and laugh lines, practical clothing, and photographer's sensibilities, become a visual liability in her curated world? "That's ridiculous," I protested, though uncertainty had already taken root. "These are family photos, not fashion magazines. Families include grandparents. They include history and generational connections." "They should," Martha agreed. "But you've seen how things are changing. Everyone curates their image now. And some people like Elise, are more concerned with how things look than what they mean." To confirm Martha's theory, I spent the next morning examining Elise's social media more thoroughly. The evidence was undeniable. Her Instagram feed was a masterclass in aesthetic curation. Color-coordinated family outfits, perfectly styled home interiors, artfully arranged holiday tables. The comments praised the magazine-worthy quality of her images, the picture-perfect family, the stunning visual harmony. Not a single photograph included me, though Elise's younger, fashionably dressed parents appeared regularly. That afternoon, I visited the twins at their home while Michael and Elise were at work. As we baked cookies together, a tradition since their childhood, I casually brought up the professional family portraits. The beach photos last summer were lovely, I mentioned, sliding a tray of cookies into the oven. I saw them on your mom's Instagram. Sophia and Olivia exchanged uncomfortable glances. You weren't supposed to see those, Sophia finally said, her voice small. Why not? I asked, keeping my tone light despite the hurt blooming inside me. Olivia, always the more direct of the twins, sighed heavily. Mom said, she said your style doesn't match their aesthetic vision. She said the photos are for her design blog and professional contacts, and they need to look cohesive. Cohesive, I repeated, the words sitting like a stone between us. She said your clothes are too colorful and casual, Sophia added reluctantly. And that silver hair doesn't photograph well with the filter palette she uses. The honesty was both painful and illuminating. I wasn't being excluded despite being loved. I was being excluded because I didn't fit a visual brand being cultivated for professional advancement and social media approval. Did your father agree with this decision? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. The girls looked at each other again, communicating in that silent language of twins. Dad just goes along with whatever Mom wants for the photos, Olivia said finally. He says it's easier that way. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept returning to Martha's suggestion and the twins' confirmation that I had been excluded not because of who I was, but because of how I looked. Too old, too colorful, too real for the polished narrative my daughter-in-law wanted to present to the world. The thought was both painful and infuriating. Around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and went to my study, where thousands of my photographs were meticulously archived in acid-free boxes and digital folders. I began pulling out images, family, gatherings I had documented over decades, portraits I had taken of now elderly neighbors in their youth, landscapes that had changed with development, buildings that no longer existed. As dawn broke, I sat surrounded by physical evidence of my life's work as a visual historian. These images weren't just aesthetically pleasing moments. They were preserved memories, documented changes, visual connections between past and present. What Elise seemed to be creating were not family photographs, but family advertisements, carefully styled images that projected an idealized version of family life rather than preserving its beautiful, imperfect reality. I picked up a magnifying loupe and began examining the details of several portraits I'd taken over the years. In one, I noticed my own reflection captured accidentally in a window behind the subject, just a tiny, almost imperceptible presence that most viewers would never notice. In another, my shadow fell faintly across the corner of the frame, a subtle reminder of the photographer's presence. That's when the idea struck me. If I couldn't be visibly present in my family's curated visual narrative, perhaps I could be invisibly present. A hidden signature, a subtle rebellion, a ghost in the machine, of perfect aesthetic. They don't want me in the frame, I whispered to myself as the morning light filtered through my study window. So I'll make sure I'm in every frame, whether they realize it or not. I pulled my laptop toward me and began researching techniques for hidden images, double exposures, and subtle photographic insertions. What began as a personal act of rebellion against invisibility would soon become my artistic signature, and eventually, the catalyst for a transformation that would challenge not just my family's perception of me, but society's dismissal of aging women as aesthetically irrelevant. As I sipped my morning coffee, watching the sun illuminate the lake in the distance, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced since Gregory's death. If they didn't want me visible in their perfectly curated photographs, I would find a way to be invisibly present in every image I created from that moment forward. A subversive reclaiming of my rightful place in the visual history I had spent decades preserving. Little did I know that this quiet moment of determination, born from hurt but transformed into creative purpose, would lead to unexpected acclaim. renewed family connections, and a powerful reminder that being overlooked doesn't mean you have to disappear. The family beach day arrived with perfect summer weather, cloudless blue skies reflecting on Lake Champlain's surface, and a gentle breeze tempering the July heat. I arrived at Lakeside Park precisely at 11, carrying a tote bag containing sunscreen, a novel I had no intention of reading, and, despite Michael's explicit instruction to leave it at home, my camera. Not my professional DSLR that everyone would recognize, but a small, unobtrusive point-and-shoot I could easily slip into my pocket if questioned. I had spent the previous 5 days experimenting with my new concept, and I wasn't about to miss the opportunity to implement it during a family gathering. Michael, Elise, and the twins were already settled on a large blanket near the shoreline when I arrived. The girls waved enthusiastically while Elise offered a polite but distant smile, her attention immediately returning to adjusting the wide-brimmed hat that protected her complexion. "Mom, you made it," Michael said, rising to help me with my tote bag. "Perfect timing. The photographer should be here in about 20 minutes. "Photographer?" I echoed, though I had already guessed as much from his earlier text. "Just someone Elise works with," he explained with forced casualness. "Thought it would be nice to get some professional beach shots while we're all together." "All together," I repeated, noting the careful avoidance of eye contact. "Will I be in these professional beach shots, Michael?" The directness of my question clearly caught him off guard. He glanced quickly at Elise, who was now pretending to be absorbed in applying sunscreen to Olivia's shoulders. "Of course," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "If you want to be." "If I want to be," I echoed again, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "When did being included in family photos become optional for me, Michael?" Before he could respond, a young woman approached our group, carrying professional camera equipment, and wearing the uniform of her generation, ripped jeans and an oversized shirt despite the beach setting. Her hair was artfully arranged in what appeared to be intentionally messy waves, and multiple earrings lined each ear. "Elise? So good to see you again," she called, setting down her equipment. "These must be the gorgeous twins you're always talking about. The light today is absolutely dreamy." Introductions were made, with me presented almost as an afterthought. "And this is Michael's mother, Virginia," Elise said, her tone suggesting I was a distant acquaintance rather than family. "Lovely to meet you," the photographer Zoe said with professional warmth. "Now, I understand we're going for casual beach family moments, right? Elise and I discussed a sunset color palette, so I'm thinking we start with some shots by the water." As Zoe and Elise consulted on locations and poses, I observed with growing clarity the dynamic Martha had identified. This wasn't a family memento being created. It was a visual product being manufactured with specific aesthetic requirements. The casual authenticity I had always valued in photography was being replaced by careful curation and artificial spontaneity. When the photo session began, my suspicions were confirmed. Zoe directed the family through a series of poses that looked casually affectionate but were meticulously arranged. Elise, Michael, and the twins were positioned in flattering groups with the lake as backdrop. Sand was artfully kicked, fake laughter was prompted, and hugs were held unnaturally long, while Zoe captured dozens of nearly identical shots. After 20 minutes of this performance, I remained seated on the blanket, having not been invited to join a single photograph. "Shall we do a few with Grandma?" Sophia finally suggested, glancing in my direction with a mixture of guilt and genuine desire to include me. A flicker of annoyance crossed Elise's face before she smoothed it into a polite smile. "Of course, if Virginia would like to join us," the qualifier hung in the air. "If Virginia would like to," as though my inclusion were an accommodation rather than an expectation. "Actually," I said, rising from the blanket with deliberate calm, "I'd prefer to take a walk along the shore while you finish up. It's such a beautiful day." The relief on Elise's face was so evident that it would have been comical if it hadn't been so painful. She hadn't wanted to directly exclude me, but was clearly grateful I had removed myself from the aesthetic equation. As I walked away, I slipped my small camera from my pocket. The family beach day had confirmed everything I had begun to suspect. I was not being forgotten or overlooked. I was being deliberately removed from the visual narrative of our family because I didn't fit the carefully constructed image Elise was cultivating. For the next hour, I wandered the shoreline, seemingly absorbed in collecting interesting stones and observing the patterns waves made on the sand. In reality, I was implementing the technique I had practiced for the past 5 days, capturing reflections of myself in the lake's surface, in sunglasses abandoned on beach towels, in the chrome trim of a classic car parked nearby, in the windows of the park pavilion. In each photograph, my reflection was subtle, just a hint of silver hair, the outline of my profile, a ghostly suggestion of my presence that would go unnoticed by casual observers but would be undeniably me to anyone who knew to look for it. I was inserting myself into the visual record in a way that couldn't be curated out, claiming space in the frame through creative defiance rather than direct confrontation. When I returned to the family blanket, the professional photo shoot had concluded. Zoe was packing her equipment while Elise scrolled through preview images on a tablet, exclaiming over particularly successful shots. "These are going to be perfect for the holiday card," she said, not bothering to look up as I rejoined the group. "And that golden light sequence is exactly what I need for the home magazine feature in September." The purpose of the family photos, marketing materials rather than mementos, couldn't have been stated more clearly. My exclusion hadn't been personal, it had been professional. I simply didn't contribute to the brand being promoted. Rather than feeling hurt by this realization, I found it oddly liberating. If my exclusion wasn't about me as a person, but about my failure to complement an artificial image, then my response could be equally impersonal. A creative challenge rather than an emotional wound. That evening, I uploaded the beach day photographs to my computer. Using techniques I had researched over the past week, I carefully enhanced the subtle reflections of myself I had captured. In a perfect shot of the lake's surface, my silvery hair and profile were just visible in the rippled water, unmistakable to anyone seeking the image but easily overlooked by casual viewers. In the window of the park pavilion, my outline could be discerned among the reflections of trees and sky. In the chrome trim of the classic car, a distorted but recognizable version of my face appeared when the image was viewed at the right angle. "I am here," I whispered to the screen, feeling a surge of satisfaction as I gathered these images into a folder labeled Hidden Presence. The next morning, Martha stopped by for coffee, and I showed her what I had created. "You clever thing," she exclaimed, leaning closer to examine the subtle self-inclusion in each image. "It's like a visual Easter egg, Virginia Holden hiding in plain sight." "It started as just a personal rebellion," I admitted, "but I'm actually finding it creatively invigorating. It's pushing me to think about reflection, perspective, and presence in entirely new ways." Martha smiled, her eyes crinkling with appreciation. "You know what I love about this? Instead of confronting them directly or withdrawing in hurt, you've found a way to assert your presence that's also artistically meaningful. You've transformed exclusion into creative opportunity." Her observation crystallized what I had been feeling. This wasn't just about refusing to disappear. It was about discovering a new artistic direction. What had begun as a response to rejection was evolving into something more significant. "I'm thinking of developing this into a series," I told her, excitement building as I articulated the idea, forming in my mind. Not just hiding myself in random images, but creating intentional portraits where the photographer is present through reflection or shadow, making visible the typically invisible presence behind the camera. Martha nodded thoughtfully. "That could be powerful, especially coming from a woman in her 70s making herself deliberately visible in a culture that works so hard to render aging women invisible. You could call it the present photographer, or reflective presence, or something suitably artistic. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into developing this concept, using every reflective surface I could find: windows, mirrors, water, polished metal, even the glass of picture frames, to create portraits where I appeared alongside my subjects. Sometimes my presence was obvious, other times so subtle it required careful observation to detect. I began by photographing friends and neighbors, explaining my concept and receiving enthusiastic participation. Martha posed in her garden with my reflection visible in her greenhouse windows. My neighbor Henry stood beside his restored vintage motorcycle, my outline appearing in its polished chrome headlamp. The barista at my favorite coffee shop smiled at the camera while my silhouette was cast in the shadow on the wall behind her. With each image, I refined my technique and developed a consistent artistic approach. I wasn't merely inserting myself as gimmick. I was exploring the relationship between subject and photographer, challenging the convention that the person behind the camera should remain invisible and unacknowledged. After accumulating 20 strong images, I approached Eleanor at the Millbrook Arts Center about the possibility of including a few in the upcoming community exhibition. "I'd need to see them first," she said, practical as always. "The theme is new perspectives, so they might fit if they're offering a genuinely fresh viewpoint." I invited her to my home the following day and presented the series, explaining the conceptual foundation as well as the technical approach. Eleanor moved through the images displayed on my computer with growing interest, occasionally leaning closer to examine a particularly subtle self-inclusion. "This is fascinating, Virginia," she said when she had viewed the entire collection. "It's working on multiple levels, technically interesting, conceptually rich, and socially relevant. The commentary on visibility and aging is particularly powerful without being heavy-handed." She selected 5 images for the exhibition, including them in a prominent section near the entrance. "I'd like you to provide an artist's statement explaining the concept," she added. "I think visitors will appreciate understanding the intentionality behind what might otherwise appear to be photographic accidents." Writing the artist's statement forced me to articulate more clearly what had begun as emotional response and evolved into artistic exploration. In Hidden Presence, I explore the conventions of portraiture by deliberately including my own reflection within each image. As a 73-year-old female photographer, I am interested in the invisibility often imposed on aging women, how we are frequently removed from the frame both literally and metaphorically. These images challenge that erasure by ensuring the photographer remains present, if subtly, within each composition. The resulting portraits acknowledge the relationship between subject and artist, between the seen and the traditionally unseen, creating a more complete visual truth. The community exhibition opening was a modest local event, attended primarily by friends, family members of participating artists, and the small circle of Millbrook residents who regularly supported arts programming. I invited Michael and his family, not expecting them to attend, but feeling it important to make the gesture. To my surprise, the twins appeared at the opening without their parents, dressed in matching black dresses that suggested they took the occasion seriously. "Dad had a work emergency," Sophia explained, hugging me tightly. "Mom said to tell you she had a deadline for a design submission." "But we wanted to see your photographs," Olivia added, linking her arm through mine. "You haven't shown us what you've been working on lately." Their interest seemed genuine, and I felt a rush of emotion as I guided them through the exhibition to my displayed work. I watched their expressions carefully as they examined the first image, a portrait of Martha in her garden with my reflection clearly visible in the greenhouse window behind her. "That's you," Sophia said, pointing to the reflection. "In the window." "It is," I confirmed. "That's the concept of the series. I'm including myself in each portrait through reflections or shadows. The twins moved slowly from one image to the next, their expressions shifting from initial confusion to growing comprehension. Wait, Olivia said suddenly, moving back to the first photograph. Is this because of what Mom did with the family photos? The directness of her question caught me off guard. I had underestimated my granddaughter's perceptiveness and their ability to connect my artistic choices to family dynamics. It started that way, I admitted, seeing no reason to be anything but honest. When I realized I was being excluded from family portraits, it made me think about visibility and who gets to be seen. But it evolved into something more interesting. A way of acknowledging the relationship between photographer and subject. The girls exchanged one of their silent twin communications before Sophia spoke. We argued with Mom about the beach photos, she said quietly. After you left, we told her it wasn't fair to leave you out. She said we didn't understand professional aesthetics, Olivia added, rolling her eyes slightly. But we understood. Perfectly. She was being mean. Their loyalty touched me deeply. It's not entirely about being mean, I said, trying to be fair despite my hurt. Your mother is building a professional brand, and there are certain aesthetic conventions in that world. I just don't happen to fit them. Because you're old? Sophia asked bluntly. Because I'm visibly old, I corrected with a small smile. I haven't had cosmetic procedures. I wear comfortable clothes rather than fashionable ones, and I don't dye my hair. In the visual world your mother operates in, those choices make me inconvenient. That's stupid, Olivia declared with teenage certainty. And these photos prove it. You're making art about the very thing she thinks makes you not fit in her pictures. I couldn't help but laugh at her astute observation. That's precisely what I'm doing. Sometimes the very thing that makes you excluded in one context becomes your strength in another. The twins stayed for nearly an hour, examining not just my work, but the entire exhibition with surprising engagement. As they prepared to leave, Sophia hugged me tightly. We're really proud of you, Grandma, she said, and we're going to tell everyone to come see your photographs. Including your parents? I asked, curious about how they would navigate that potential conflict. Especially them, Olivia said with determined loyalty. Dad needs to see what he's been going along with, and Mom needs to see that aesthetics isn't just about looking like an Instagram filter. After they left, I circulated through the exhibition, chatting with other attendees and answering questions about my work. Several people expressed particular interest in the concept, with one local retired professor describing it as a subtle but powerful commentary on female visibility in an ageist culture. By the end of the evening, all 5 of my displayed photographs had red sold dots beside them, a surprise that left me momentarily speechless when Eleanor pointed it out. This never happens at community exhibitions, she said, clearly delighted. Usually it's friends buying a piece out of support, rather than genuine collecting interest. But these went to serious buyers, including Professor Winters from the State University Arts Program, who purchased 2. The unexpected sales were gratifying, but more meaningful was the artistic validation, the recognition that what had begun as emotional response to family exclusion had evolved into work with genuine merit and resonance. The following day, I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. Ms. Holden, this is Professor Rebecca Winters from State University's Visual Arts Department. I purchased 2 of your photographs last night and would be interested in discussing your series further. Would you be available for coffee this week? The message was so unexpected that I read it 3 times before responding affirmatively, suggesting a meeting at Millbrook Coffee Roasters the following afternoon. I spent the morning alternating between excitement and anxiety. What could a university art professor possibly want to discuss with a self-taught photographer in her 70s? Professor Winters turned out to be younger than I expected, perhaps in her mid-40s, with a stylish asymmetrical haircut and the confident demeanor of someone comfortable in academic settings. She greeted me warmly, immediately putting me at ease. "I'm so glad you could meet on short notice," she said, settling across from me with her cappuccino. "I was genuinely intrigued by your work last night, particularly the conceptual underpinning of making the photographer visible within the portrait." "Thank you," I responded, still somewhat bewildered by her interest. "It began as a personal project, but evolved into something more intentional." "The best art often does," she observed. "Personal experience transformed into universal commentary. What particularly struck me was how your work engages with current academic discussions about female visibility, aging in visual culture, and the politics of who remains in or out of the frame." For the next hour, Professor Winters discussed my photographs in language I had never applied to my own work, terms like feminist visual theory, counter-narratives of aging, and subversion of photographic conventions. She spoke about my technical approach and conceptual framework with a seriousness I found both flattering and slightly disorienting. "The reason I wanted to meet," she explained finally, "is that I curate the University Gallery's Emerging Voices exhibition each fall. Despite the name, emerging doesn't necessarily mean young. It means artists developing significant new work regardless of career stage. I'd like to include your Hidden Presence series, assuming you can expand it to about 15 pieces by September." The invitation was so unexpected that I nearly spilled my tea. "You want to exhibit my work at the University Gallery?" "Absolutely," she confirmed. "Your series speaks to important contemporary themes while demonstrating technical skill and conceptual depth. The fact that you're embarking on this exploration in your 70s adds another compelling dimension, challenging assumptions about creativity and artistic evolution in later life." As our meeting concluded, Professor Winters provided specific details about the exhibition timeline, space constraints, and technical requirements. I left the coffee shop in a state of disbelief, clutching her business card and exhibition guidelines like talismans of validation. When I called Martha to share the news, her excitement matched my own. "I told you this was more than just a personal rebellion," she exclaimed. "You've tapped into something significant, aesthetically and socially." "It still feels surreal," I admitted. 2 weeks ago, I was hurt and angry about being excluded from family photos. Now I'm preparing for a university gallery exhibition. "That's the alchemy of creative work," Martha observed. "You transformed exclusion into inclusion, invisibility, into presence, rejection into recognition. And you did it through your art, rather than through argument or confrontation." That evening, I received a text from Michael. "Mom, the twins can't stop talking about your photographs. Would it be okay if Elise and I stop by the exhibition tomorrow? They'll be taking it down soon, right?" The message surprised me. I hadn't expected Michael or especially Elise to show interest in my work. "The exhibition runs through Saturday," I replied. "I'd be happy to meet you there tomorrow afternoon if you'd like." His response came quickly. "Great, we'll come at 3. The twins are insisting." The prospect of Michael and Elise viewing my work that had been partly inspired by Elise's exclusionary actions, created a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Would they recognize themselves in the artistic response? Would they be offended? Or uncomfortable? Would it create additional family tension rather than understanding? The next afternoon, I arrived at the Arts Center early, spending time with each photograph to prepare myself for whatever reaction might come. The Hidden Presence series wasn't accusatory or angry. It was a creative exploration of visibility that had evolved beyond its initial catalyst. I could discuss it on those terms without reference to the family dynamics that had inspired it. At precisely 3 o'clock, Michael, Elise, and the twins entered the gallery. The girls immediately rushed to hug me while Michael followed more, hesitantly, Elise remaining slightly apart, her expression carefully neutral. "We've been telling them how amazing your photographs are," Sophia announced, pulling her father toward the display. You have to see how Grandma put herself in every picture. I watched nervously as Michael and Elise examined each image, their expressions offering few clues to their thoughts. The twins hovered nearby, clearly invested in their parents' reaction. These are remarkable, Mom, Michael finally said, turning to me with what appeared to be genuine admiration. The technical skill is impressive, but the concept is what makes them special. I had no idea you were working on something so significant. Thank you, I responded, touched by his sincere praise. It's a new direction for me, exploring the daisy relationship between photographer and subject. Elise had remained silent throughout, studying each photograph with the critical eye of someone familiar with visual composition. Finally, she turned to me, her expression having shifted from neutral to something more complex. These sold, she noted, gesturing to the red dots beside each image. All of them. Yes, I confirmed. It was unexpected but very gratifying. She nodded slowly, as though processing this information. The concept is quite clever, she said finally. Making visible what's traditionally invisible, creating presence within the frame while remaining behind the camera. Her analysis was surprisingly insightful, focusing entirely on the artistic elements without acknowledgement of the personal dynamics that might have inspired them. It was a professional assessment rather than a personal connection, which was, perhaps, the most I could have hoped for. Professor Winters from State University purchased 2 of them, Olivia announced proudly. And she wants Grandma to be in a special exhibition at the University Gallery. This revelation clearly caught both Michael and Elise by surprise. An exhibition at the University Gallery? Michael repeated. Mom, that's significant. Why didn't you tell us? It just happened yesterday, I explained. I'm still processing it myself. The professor is interested in how the series addresses female visibility and aging in visual culture. A flicker of something, recognition, discomfort, crossed Elise's carefully composed features. For the briefest moment, I wondered if she was making the connection between her exclusionary actions and the art they had inadvertently inspired. If she did make that connection, she chose not to acknowledge it. Instead, she offered a small, professional smile. Congratulations. It's well-deserved recognition. As they prepared to leave, the twins hugged me again while Michael expressed pride in my accomplishment. Only Elise held back, maintaining the polite distance that had characterized our relationship for years. I'd be interested in seeing how the series develops, she said as they were leaving, her tone suggesting professional curiosity rather than personal connection. The university exhibition will require more images, correct? Yes, about 15. Total, I confirmed. She nodded thoughtfully. If you need any particular reflective surfaces or settings for future photographs, I might be able to suggest some locations through my design connections. The offer caught me completely off guard. Was this an olive branch? A professional courtesy? Or perhaps an attempt to maintain control by inserting herself into my creative process? Thank you, I responded cautiously. I'll keep that in mind. After they left, I sat alone in the gallery, considering the unexpected developments of the past 2 weeks. What had begun as a private act of rebellion against being excluded had transformed into public recognition of my artistic voice. I had turned invisibility into its opposite, not just visibility but celebration of my presence. As I gathered my things to leave, Eleanor approached with an envelope. The proceeds from your sales, she explained, handing it to me. Less the gallery's 20%, of course. The amount was modest but meaningful, tangible proof that my work had value beyond personal expression. I thanked her, still somewhat dazed by how quickly events were evolving. Professor Winters called me this morning, Eleanor added with a smile. She's quite enthusiastic about your work. Said something about your series perfectly embodying the tension between presence and erasure in visual representation of aging women. I laughed softly. 2 weeks ago, I was just a grandmother being excluded from family photos. Now I'm apparently making academic statements about feminist visual theory. Eleanor's expression grew serious. Don't underestimate the power of personal experience transformed into art, Virginia. The most resonant work often comes from precisely that transformation. Hurt into insight, exclusion into new perspective, invisibility into presence. As I drove home that evening, her words echoed in my mind alongside the memory of Elise's unexpected offer of assistance. The family dynamics that had initially wounded me hadn't been resolved through confrontation or explanation, but something had shifted nonetheless. My artistic response to exclusion had created a new context for interaction, one based on creative expression rather than personal rejection. The project that had begun as a hidden rebellion was becoming something far more significant, both artistically and personally. I had discovered not just a new photographic technique, but a powerful way to assert my continued presence in a world that too often rendered women my age invisible. The journey ahead would bring challenges and opportunities I couldn't yet imagine. But one thing was already clear. I had refused to disappear from the frame, and in doing so, had found a new way to be seen. When I arrived home, I immediately went to my study, fired up my computer, and began organizing images for the university exhibition. The Hidden Presence series was no longer just about my family's photos. It had become about all the ways aging women are erased from visual culture, all the ways we are expected to step out of the frame and disappear into the background of others' lives. They didn't want me in their carefully curated family portrait, I whispered to myself as I sorted through potential images. But they've inadvertently pushed me into creating the most meaningful work of my life. The irony wasn't lost on me. Being excluded from the frame had ultimately led to finding my most powerful artistic voice. Sometimes the very rejection that wounds us most deeply contains the seeds of our most significant transformation. Preparing. For the University Gallery exhibition consumed my summer. Professor Winters had requested 15 photographs for the Hidden Presence series, and I had just under 2 months to expand my collection while maintaining conceptual consistency and technical quality. The pressure was both exhilarating and terrifying, like being given a high-stakes assignment decades after I thought such professional challenges were behind me. You need to think about subjects that will resonate with the university audience while staying true to your conceptual foundation, Martha advised during one of our planning sessions on my porch. We sat surrounded by printed contact sheets and image samples, iced tea sweating in glasses as the July heat pressed against us. I don't want to just repeat the same technical trick with different subjects, I agreed, studying the images I'd already created. That would make it a gimmick, rather than a meaningful exploration. After considerable thought, I decided to expand the series in a direction that deepened its conceptual framework, photographing other women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who had experienced various forms of social invisibility. Each portrait would include my reflection, maintaining the original concept, but would also capture subjects whose life experiences echoed themes of visibility and erasure. My first subject was Dorothea Mills, an 86-year-old former chemistry professor who had been one of the first female faculty members at State University in the 1960s. I photographed her in her home laboratory, where she still conducted independent research despite having been effectively pushed into retirement a decade earlier. In the final image, her focused intensity dominated the foreground, while my reflection appeared in the glass cabinet of chemicals behind her. Two women of different generations but similar experiences of professional marginalization. Next came Helen Grayson, a 75-year-old former fashion model now volunteering at the hospital auxiliary. The contrast between her former visibility, literally paid to be seen and admired, and her current social invisibility created a powerful narrative. I captured her arranging flowers at the hospital entrance, my reflection appearing in the glass door behind her as patients walked past without noticing either of us. Louise Chen, 67, had been the first female surgical chief at Regional Medical Center before arthritis forced her to step back from operating. I photographed her in the hospital's memorial hall, where portraits of former chiefs lined the walls, all men except for her. My reflection appeared in the glass covering her official portrait, creating a multi-layered image of representation and presence. Each session involved not just photography, but extensive conversation about the subject's experiences of visibility and invisibility throughout their lives. These women shared stories that paralleled my own in surprising ways. The experience of being interrupted in meetings, overlooked for opportunities, or literally not seen in public spaces as they aged. It happens gradually, Dorothea observed, during our session. First, they stop seeing you as a woman, which has its benefits, frankly, but then they stop seeing you entirely. You become like furniture in the room. I notice it most in restaurants, Helen added during her interview. Servers look past me to younger companions when taking orders, as though my preferences, my very presence, is less substantial. These conversations enriched the conceptual foundation of the project, transforming it from personal rebellion into broader social commentary. I was no longer just addressing my exclusion from family photographs, but documenting a shared experience among women of a certain age, the systematic erasure that happens through overlooked contributions, dismissed expertise, and literal visual absence from media and public representation. Throughout this period of intense creativity, my relationship with Michael and his family remained complicated. The twins visited regularly, genuinely interested in the project's development, and eager to share their perspectives as teenagers navigating their own visibility concerns in a social media age. It's like the opposite for us, Sophia observed, one afternoon while helping me sort contact sheets. We're constantly visible online, but it's never our real selves, just filtered, edited versions that look like everyone else. Excessive visibility without authenticity, I mused, struck by the paradox. While we experience invisibility despite authentic presence, Michael occasionally joined the twins on these visits, showing sincere interest in my progress and pride in the university exhibition opportunity. He seemed genuinely regretful about the exclusionary family photos, though he never directly acknowledged his complicity or apologized. "The project is really impressive, Mom," he said during one visit, studying the portraits I'd completed. "You're capturing something important about how society treats older women. I never really thought about it before." His comment revealed both growing awareness and lingering blindness, recognition of the broader social issue without connection to his personal participation in it. I accepted this partial understanding as progress while recognizing its limitations. Elise remained the most complex family relationship. True to her word, she had emailed several suggestions for locations with interesting reflective qualities that might serve my project. The gesture seemed simultaneously supportive and controlling, acknowledging my work while attempting to influence its direction. Our most significant interaction came in early August when she unexpectedly called to request a meeting. "I'd like to discuss a potential opportunity," she said, her professional tone giving no hint of personal connection. "Are you available for coffee tomorrow?" We met at Millbrook Coffee Roasters, Elise arriving precisely on time in an immaculate linen dress that somehow remained unwrinkled despite the summer humidity. After brief pleasantries, she placed a glossy magazine on the table between us. "This is Lakeside Living," she explained, though I was familiar with the regional lifestyle publication where her design work occasionally appeared. "They're planning a special issue on local artists in September, and I've mentioned your work to the features editor." I stared at her, surprised both by the gesture and her matter-of-fact delivery. "That's very thoughtful," I said cautiously. "May I ask why?" The question seemed to discomfit her slightly. She adjusted her silverware before responding. "Your work deserves recognition," she said finally. "Whatever our personal dynamics, the Hidden Presence series is objectively impressive. The magazine is always looking for local interest stories with broader relevance, and your exhibition at the university gallery provides the perfect news hook. I studied her carefully, trying to discern motivation beneath the professional explanation. Was this genuine appreciation? An attempt to associate herself with my unexpected success? A peace offering? Or perhaps all three? I appreciate the suggestion, I responded, maintaining my own professional demeanor. I'd be interested in the opportunity depending on how the work would be presented. Of course, Elise nodded, visibly relaxing as we stayed in safe professional territory. The features editor would want to interview you and photograph some of your work. They'd likely want to photograph you as well, in your workspace or with your camera. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had systematically excluded me from family photographs was now arranging for me to be photographed for a magazine. I contained my amusement and agreed to the contact information exchange. As we prepared to leave, Elise hesitated, clearly weighing whether to say something more personal. Finally, she spoke. The twins told me about the concept behind your series, about visibility and older women being erased from the visual record. She paused, perfectly manicured nails tapping the magazine cover. It's made me think about certain choices I've made with our family photography. It was the closest she had come to acknowledging her role in inspiring my project. I waited, giving her space to continue if she chose. I work in a visual field where aesthetics matter enormously, she said after a moment. Perhaps I've allowed professional considerations to influence personal documentation in ways that weren't inclusive. The carefully worded quasi-acknowledgement was typical of Elise, technically addressing the issue while avoiding direct admission or apology. Still, it represented movement in our relationship, however slight. Art often emerges from personal experience transformed into something universal, I offered, echoing Eleanor's wisdom. In this case, feeling excluded led to exploring broader questions about who remains visible in our visual culture and who disappears. She nodded, seemingly relieved by my non-confrontational response. The magazine will be contacting you next week, she said, returning to professional certainty. I think you'll find them respectful of your vision. The interaction left me thoughtful. Elise had taken a small step toward recognition, if not reconciliation. Her professional aesthetic sensibilities, the very values that had led to my exclusion, had also allowed her to recognize genuine merit in my work. It wasn't personal warmth, but it was a form of respect I hadn't previously experienced from her. The magazine interview materialized the following week, with a young features writer visiting my home studio to discuss the Hidden Presence series and my upcoming university exhibition. She seemed genuinely interested in both the technical aspects and conceptual foundation of the work. So you're literally inserting yourself into each portrait through reflections, she clarified, studying the images spread across my work table. Making visible what's traditionally invisible, the photographer behind the camera. Exactly, I confirmed. It's about acknowledging the relationship between subject and photographer, but also more broadly about claiming space as an older woman in a visual culture that often renders us invisible. The writer nodded enthusiastically. That's what makes this newsworthy beyond just local interest. You're addressing universal themes about aging, gender, and representation through a highly personal artistic approach. The magazine photographer who accompanied her was a woman in her 50s who immediately understood the meta-nature of photographing a photographer. We should absolutely incorporate your concept into your portrait, she suggested. Perhaps capturing you with your camera, but with your reflection visible in something within the frame. It would visually explain your artistic approach. The resulting photographs were thoughtfully composed. Me in my studio surrounded by work prints, my reflection, visible in a large mirror that also reflected my camera. The visual recursion cleverly illustrated the concept while presenting me as a serious artist, rather than just an elderly hobbyist. 2 weeks later, As I was finalizing selections for the university exhibition, Martha arrived at my door waving a copy of Lakeside Living, her expression triumphant. "You've got the cover," she announced, thrusting the magazine into my hands. Sure enough, one of the photographer's images of me in my studio appeared on the cover, accompanied by the headline, "The Visible Woman: How Virginia Holden's Hidden Presence Makes Us See Aging Differently." The 4-page feature inside included several of my photographs, alongside a thoughtful analysis of their significance. "This is incredible coverage," Martha said, leafing through the article. "Regional magazines like this usually feature aspirational kitchens and garden parties, not conceptual photography about female aging and visibility." I had to agree. The article presented my work with surprising sophistication, quoting Professor Winters on its artistic merit and contextualizing it within contemporary discussions about representation. My age was mentioned not as a curiosity, but as a relevant factor in my perspective on visibility. Elise must have had significant influence with the editorial team, I observed, recognizing that the prominent placement and serious treatment likely reflected her advocacy. "Does it bother you?" Martha asked. "That the person who excluded you is now promoting your work?" I considered the question carefully. "Not really," I concluded. "There's a certain poetic justice to it, and it suggests growth on her part, recognition, of value she previously dismissed." Later that day, I received a text from Michael. "Just saw the magazine. Cover looks amazing. We're all so proud of you, Mom." The message was followed by a family group selfie, Michael, Elise, and the twins, all holding copies of the magazine with my cover portrait. The image struck me as significant not just because they were celebrating my success, but because it was a casual, authentic family photograph rather than a professionally staged portrait, the exact type of documentation Elise had previously avoided. The university exhibition opening in mid-September marked another turning point in my unexpected late-life artistic emergence. The gallery space was considerably more formal than our community arts center, with professional lighting, precisely arranged display walls, and printed catalogs featuring artist statements and critical analysis. Professor Winters had curated my 15 photographs alongside work from 7 other emerging voices of various ages and backgrounds. The Hidden Presence series occupied a prominent corner of the gallery, the images arranged to create a visual narrative about visibility, aging, and photographic presence. "We're expecting a strong turnout," Professor Winters informed me during installation. "There's been significant interest in your work specifically. The magazine article generated buzz beyond our usual art community audience." The opening reception exceeded all expectations. The gallery was packed with university faculty, art students, local community members, and even several curators from regional museums. I found myself continuously engaged in conversations about my work, explaining the technical approach, conceptual foundation, and personal inspiration behind the series. "Your timing is remarkable," noted one museum curator as we discussed the photographs. "There's growing interest in the cultural experience of aging, particularly for women navigating visibility in a youth-obsessed visual culture. Your work addresses this with both technical skill and emotional resonance." Michael and his entire family attended the opening, the twins beaming with pride as they introduced themselves to various attendees as the artist's granddaughters. Even Elise seemed genuinely impressed by the professional presentation and serious critical response to my work. "The university exhibition catalog will be a valuable addition to your portfolio," she observed with characteristic focus on career advancement. "Have you thought about what comes next? Other exhibition opportunities or project directions?" Her question highlighted how thoroughly our relationship had transformed, from excluding me from family photographs to advising on my artistic career trajectory. The shift wasn't toward personal warmth, but professional respect. a foundation that suited us both better than forced familial intimacy. The most unexpected visitor to the exhibition opening was my daughter Cynthia, who had flown in from Seattle, without telling me she was coming. "I couldn't miss your first major exhibition," she explained, hugging me tightly. "Especially not after seeing that magazine article Michael sent. Mom, this is extraordinary work, conceptually sophisticated, visually compelling, and culturally significant." Cynthia's technical background gave her a different perspective on my photographs, focusing on the optical properties of various reflective surfaces and how they distorted or preserved my image within each composition. "You've created a visual algorithm of sorts," she observed as we walked through the exhibition. "A consistent creative presence with variable manifestations depending on the reflective medium. It's mathematically elegant." Her analytical appreciation complemented the emotional and cultural responses from other viewers, adding yet another dimension to how the work could be understood. By the end of the evening, all 15 photographs displayed had sold, an unusual outcome for an exhibition not specifically designed as a sales event. "We'll need to discuss gallery representation," Professor Winters told me as the reception concluded. "There's clearly market interest in your work beyond the academic art world. The suggestion that I might need professional representation for my photography struck me as surreal, a development so far beyond my expectations that I could barely process its implications. I had begun this project as a personal response to family exclusion, never imagining it might lead to a late-life career as a recognized artist. The weeks following the exhibition opening brought a cascade of unexpected developments. A curator from the State Museum of Contemporary Art requested a studio visit to discuss including several pieces in their upcoming exhibition on age and image. The Regional Arts Council invited me to apply for a project grant to expand the series into new conceptual territory. 3 different galleries inquired about representation opportunities. Most significantly, Professor Winters introduced me to the director of a senior artists residency program in New Mexico that supported creative professionals over 65 developing new work. "They offer month-long residencies with studio space, housing, and a modest stipend," she explained. "The program specifically focuses on artists addressing aspects of aging through their work, precisely what you're doing." "With hidden presence. A month in New Mexico?" I echoed, trying to imagine myself in such a setting. "I haven't traveled alone since Gregory died." "That's exactly why you should consider it," Martha insisted when I shared the opportunity with her. "This isn't just about your art anymore, Virginia. It's about reclaiming your identity as someone who explores, experiences, and engages with the world independently." The residency application required a project proposal extending my current work in new directions. After considerable thought, I developed a concept called collective presence that would involve photographing groups of older women in settings where they had experienced invisibility, with my reflection incorporated to acknowledge our shared experience of erasure. The project would move from individual portraits to collective representation, I explained in my application, addressing how aging women experience both individual and systemic invisibility while creating visual evidence of our continued presence and relevance. While awaiting the residency decision, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary transformation of the past 6 months. What had begun as hurt feelings over family photos had evolved into a significant artistic exploration, professional recognition, and potential new career direction in my 70s. The very exclusion that had wounded me had ultimately led to inclusion in art spaces I had never imagined entering. This period of reflection coincided with another family gathering, Thanksgiving. At Michael and Elise's home, the invitation had come from Michael, with specific mention that, "We'd love to have you bring your camera and take some family photos if you're willing." The request represented a complete reversal of previous patterns, not just including me in family photographs but acknowledging the value of my photographic perspective. It suggested a significant shift in family dynamics, particularly in Elise's attitude toward my visual contribution. When I arrived for Thanksgiving dinner, I found the house decorated with Elise's usual impeccable taste, but with one notable addition. A framed copy of my lakeside living cover displayed prominently on a side table in the living room. The placement seemed deliberate, an acknowledgement of my artistic identity within the family space. The girls insisted, Elise explained when she noticed me observing it. They're extremely proud of their grandmother, the famous photographer, her tone contained a hint of humor alongside genuine respect, a complex acknowledgement of how our relationship had evolved through my unexpected artistic success. The meal proceeded with unusual warmth, the twins excitedly sharing news of their school activities while Michael and Elise discussed their work projects. When dessert was served, Michael proposed a toast. "To Mom," he said, raising his glass, "whose artistic vision has always seen us more clearly than we sometimes see ourselves. We're so proud of your success and grateful for your perspective, behind the camera and in our lives." The sentiment brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It wasn't just the acknowledgement of my recent achievements, but the recognition of my long-standing role as the family's visual historian, the one who had always valued capturing our authentic connections rather than curated perfections. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room, Elise surprised me further. "Virginia, we were hoping you might take some family photographs today," she said. "Not professionally staged ones, but the kind you've always valued. Authentic moments that capture who we really are together." The request represented her most direct acknowledgement yet of the difference between her approach to family documentation and mine, and a clear preference, on this occasion at least, for my perspective. "I'd be happy to," I agreed, reaching for the camera I had brought but hadn't expected to use. For the next hour, I captured the family in various groupings and activities, casual, authentic moments of connection rather than posed perfection. The twins showing their grandmother the latest TikTok dance craze, Michael and Elise laughing together over shared memories. The entire family squished onto the sofa for an impromptu group shot with my camera's self-timer. In these photographs, I was visibly present, not through reflection or shadow, but as an acknowledged family member included in the visual record. My silver hair, laugh lines, and comfortable clothing were not aesthetic liabilities to be excluded, but valued elements of our family's authentic representation. As I prepared to leave, Elise walked me to the door, pausing before opening it. "I've been thinking about what your work is really saying," she said, her tone more personal than usual. "About visibility and who controls the narrative of how we're seen." I nodded, giving her space to continue. "I've spent my career focused on aesthetic perfection, creating spaces and images that meet certain standards of visual appeal," she continued. "It's made me successful professionally, but I'm realizing it may have led to unfortunate choices personally." It was the closest she had come to a direct acknowledgement of her role in my exclusion from family photographs. "Your hidden presence series forced me to see what I was doing, not just to you, but to what our family documentation actually represents," she added. "Perfect aesthetics versus authentic connection. I think I've been prioritizing the wrong values in our personal visual history." Her insight surprised me with its depth and sincerity. "Photography serves different purposes," I offered. "There's room for both aesthetic achievement and authentic documentation." "Perhaps," she nodded, "but not when aesthetic preferences result in erasing family members from the visual record. That was wrong of me." The simple acknowledgement, "that was wrong of me," represented a significant breakthrough in our relationship. Not effusive apology or emotional reconciliation, but honest recognition of error consistent with Elise's straightforward personality. "Thank you for saying that," I responded simply. "And thank you for including me today, both in the photographs and in recognizing my work." She nodded, clearly more comfortable returning to professional territory. "The New Mexico residency application. Have you heard anything yet?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Decisions are announced next week." "You'll get it," she said with characteristic certainty. "Your work has momentum now, and if you do, we'll help with the house while you're away. The twins can check on things regularly." The practical offer of support reflected Elise's personality, showing care through logistics rather than emotion, but represented genuine family connection nonetheless. Driving home that evening, I found myself reflecting on the parallel transformations of the past 6 months, my artistic emergence alongside evolving family dynamics. Both had begun from the same catalyst, my exclusion from family photographs, but had developed in ways I never could have anticipated. The following Wednesday, as I sorted through the Thanksgiving photographs in preparation for sharing them with the family, an email arrived from the New Mexico residency program. I stared at the subject line, "Residency Program Acceptance," for several seconds before finding the courage to open it. The acceptance letter was warm and specific, praising my collective presence proposal and noting the selection committee's enthusiasm for supporting work that challenges assumptions about creativity, visibility, and artistic relevance in later life. I would be departing for New Mexico in February for a 4-week residency, my first significant independent travel since Gregory's death, and my first formal artistic residency at age 73. The prospect was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating, a complete departure from the comfortable routines I had established in widowhood. I immediately called Martha to share the news. "I knew it," she exclaimed. "They'd be fools not to accept you. This is going to be transformative, Virginia. Living in an artist community, focusing entirely on your creative work, experiencing a completely different landscape and culture." "It's overwhelming," I admitted. "Exciting but scary. I haven't ventured this far out of my comfort zone in decades." "That's precisely why it's so important," Martha insisted. "Remember how this all started, with you being pushed out of the frame? Now you're not just inserting yourself back into the picture, you're creating entirely new visual narratives centered on your perspective." Her observation crystallized the profound transformation of the past 6 months. I had moved from object to subject, from being excluded to determining inclusion, from invisibility to creating new forms of visibility not just for myself, but for other women sharing similar experiences. Later that evening, I received a series of congratulatory texts from Michael, Elise, and the twins after I shared my residency news. Their enthusiastic support, offering to help with household arrangements, promising video calls during my absence, suggesting southwestern photography locations, reinforced how significantly our family dynamics had evolved. As I prepared for bed that night, I paused before the hallway of family photographs I had taken over decades, the visual history I had meticulously preserved despite changing cameras, developing technologies, and evolving artistic approaches. Among these familiar images now hung a new addition, the group photograph from Thanksgiving with me visibly present among my family members, all of us imperfect, authentic, and connected. The journey from exclusion to inclusion, from invisibility to presence, from rejection to recognition, had transformed not just my artistic life, but my understanding of visibility itself. I had discovered that being seen, truly seen rather than merely visible, required not just physical inclusion in the frame, but acknowledgement of perspective, value, and continuing relevance. In refusing to disappear from the visual record, I had ultimately created a new visual language for asserting presence, not through confrontation or complaint, but through creative transformation of exclusion into its opposite. The very aesthetic rejection that had wounded me had ultimately led to aesthetic recognition beyond anything I could have imagined. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself thinking of the women I would photograph in New Mexico. Other aging artists and perhaps local community members whose experiences of visibility and erasure would both parallel and diverge from my own. The Collective Presence Project would extend my exploration beyond personal experience toward broader documentation of how women claim visual space in a culture that often suggests they should disappear with age. The irony remained both painful and profound. If Elise had included me in those family photographs, if my visual presence had been welcomed rather than excluded, I might never have discovered this artistic voice or developed work that resonated beyond personal expression. Sometimes rejection contains unexpected gifts, if we can transform hurt into creative purpose rather than bitter resignation. My exclusion from the family photo had ultimately led to my face appearing in hundreds of frames, not just the hidden, self-portraits of my original rebellion, but magazine covers, exhibition catalogs, gallery walls, and soon, the collective portraits I would create during my residency. In seeking to make myself visible, I had created a body of work that made others see aging women differently, not as aesthetic inconveniences to be cropped from the perfect family picture, but as complex creative presences whose perspective enriches the visual record precisely because of our lived experience. As my consciousness faded toward sleep, one final thought surfaced, perhaps the most significant realization of this unexpected journey. They hadn't wanted me in the family photo, but in excluding me, they had inadvertently pushed me into a much larger frame, one where my presence was not just included but celebrated, not just visible but valued, not just recorded but recognized for its unique and necessary perspective. 3 years have passed since I discovered that family portrait hanging above Michael and Elise's fireplace, the Bye, one I hadn't been invited to appear in, the one that sparked my creative rebellion and unexpected artistic journey. At 76, I find myself in a life so transformed from those early days of hurt and exclusion that it sometimes feels like I'm living someone else's story. My studio, once the converted guest bedroom in my family home, now occupies a light-filled space in the renovated textile mill that houses Millbrook's growing arts community. Large windows overlook the lake, providing both illumination for my work and reflective surfaces that still occasionally appear in my self-including portraits. The walls display prints from various exhibition series, awards from photography competitions, and a growing collection of press coverage documenting my late-life artistic emergence. The Hidden Presence series that began as personal rebellion has evolved through several iterations and conceptual expansions. After the university exhibition's success, it traveled to 3 regional museums before being acquired in its entirety by the State Museum of Contemporary Art for their permanent collection, an honor that still leaves me slightly breathless when I allow myself to fully absorb its significance. The New Mexico residency proved transformative in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Living among other artists in the high desert landscape, surrounded by extraordinary light and unfamiliar geography, I developed the Collective Presence project that expanded my focus from individual portraits to group compositions of older women. Using complex arrangements of mirrors and reflective surfaces, I captured multiple generations of women in settings where they had experienced invisibility: corporate boardrooms, academic institutions, medical facilities, media environments. Virginia Holden has transformed from documenting invisibility to actively creating new forms of visibility, wrote one critic reviewing the exhibition that resulted from the residency. Her work has evolved from personal testimony to cultural intervention, challenging viewers to recognize patterns of erasure while creating powerful counter-images of female presence and perspective. The residency also introduced me to Isabella Markham, a 78-year-old painter whose vibrant abstract canvases had gained recognition after decades of working in relative obscurity while supporting herself as a high school art teacher. Our shared experience of late-life artistic validation created an immediate bond, which developed into professional collaboration and eventually into a relationship neither of us had expected at our age. Isabella now splits her time between her Santa Fe studio and my Millbrook home, our creative practices both independent and interconnected as we navigate the surprising gift of late-life partnership. Her teenage grandchildren visit during summer breaks, filling my quiet house with music and activity that sometimes reminds me of when my own children were young. We're the poster women for creative reinvention. Isabella often jokes during our joint artist talks at universities and arts organizations, proving that the most interesting work sometimes comes after everyone expects you to disappear into quiet retirement. This afternoon, I'm preparing for what feels like a culmination of these extraordinary 3 years. The opening of Reflective Generations, a major solo exhibition at the Regional Museum of Modern Art featuring 60 photographs spanning my artistic evolution from the original Hidden Presence series through subsequent projects exploring visibility, aging, and female representation. The museum has produced a hardcover catalog with scholarly essays contextualizing my work within feminist visual theory and aging studies, an academic validation I never imagined when I began hiding my reflection in beach day photographs as an act of quiet rebellion. Even more surprisingly, the museum's education department has developed programming for school groups using my work to discuss representation and visibility across generations. As I make final preparations for the exhibition opening, my phone chimes with a text message from Sophia. "Grandma, we're all set for tonight. The whole family is coming early to see the exhibition before the crowds arrive. Olivia and I have a surprise for you, too." The twins, now 19 and in their first year of college, have remained my most enthusiastic supporters, even as their personal styles have evolved in directions their mother might not have predicted. Sophia is studying photojournalism, directly inspired by watching my late-life artistic journey. Olivia has embraced environmental science, but maintains photography as a serious hobby, often accompanying me on shoots when she's home on breaks. My relationship with Michael has deepened through these years of transformation. His initial pride in my unexpected success has evolved into genuine appreciation for my artistic perspective and values. Our conversations now extend beyond family matters to discussions of creativity, purpose, and legacy. Subjects we had rarely explored before, my late-life career emergence. "You've changed how I think about aging, Mom," he told me recently during one of our regular lunch meetings. "Not just through your photography, but through how you've approached this entire chapter of your life. With curiosity and courage, rather than resignation." Cynthia and her family have become more present in my life as well, visiting more frequently since my work began receiving recognition. Her technical perspective continues to influence my approach, particularly as I've incorporated more complex reflective arrangements in recent projects. Her children, now teenagers, have developed their own creative interests, with Emma showing particular talent in digital photography that creates a connection across the geographic distance that separates us. Perhaps most surprisingly, my relationship with Elise has evolved into something I would never have predicted when she was deliberately excluding me from family photographs. The professional respect that began with the magazine feature has deepened into a genuine collaborative relationship, her design sensibilities informing the presentation of my work in exhibition settings, my photographic perspective occasionally contributing to her design publications. "We approach aesthetics from completely different directions," she observed during a recent conversation, "but we've both dedicated our lives to understanding how visual elements communicate meaning. It took me too long to recognize the value of your perspective." This acknowledgement, offered without qualification or defense, represented how far we had come from those early days of her curated exclusion. We will never share the easy warmth that characterizes some mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationships, but we have developed something perhaps more valuable: mutual professional respect layered with genuine familial care. The exhibition opening is scheduled for 7 o'clock, but at 5:30, I arrive at the museum to meet my family for their private preview. The museum director has graciously arranged for this family viewing before the public reception, a consideration that feels particularly meaningful given how this artistic journey began with family exclusion. The exhibition space exceeds my expectations. The museum's design team has transformed the galleries into a chronological journey through my artistic evolution, beginning with the original Hidden Presence series in the first room, then moving through subsequent projects including Collective Presence, Reflective Institutions, documenting how corporate and academic spaces physically marginalize older women, and my most recent work, Generational Mirrors, featuring portraits of women from multiple generations within the same family. I walk through the galleries making final adjustments. I'm struck by how completely my artistic identity has transformed in just 3 years. What began as a personal response to family exclusion has evolved into a significant body of work addressing universal questions about representation, visibility, and the politics of being seen. The museum entrance doors open, and my family arrives, en masse. Michael and Elise, the twins, Cynthia and Thomas with their children, even Isabella, who has flown in from Santa Fe for the opening. Their excited voices echo through the gallery as they greet me with hugs, flowers, and palpable pride. "This is incredible, Grandma," Sophia exclaims, spinning slowly to take in the comprehensive display. "Seeing all your work together like this, it tells such a powerful story. Not just about photography, but about refusing to disappear," Olivia adds, always the more philosophical of the twins. "About making yourself visible when others try to erase you." We move through the galleries together, my family engaging with the work not just as supporters but as thoughtful viewers, offering observations about particular images, asking questions about technical approaches, noticing connections between different series. In the room featuring Generational Mirrors, Elise pauses before a triptych showing 3 generations of women from a local family, each image incorporating my reflection. "In a different manner, your technical approach has become so sophisticated," she observes, studying how I've used multiple reflective surfaces to create complex visual relationships between subjects. "The concept was strong from the beginning, but your execution has evolved dramatically." Her professional assessment, delivered with genuine appreciation rather than competitive comparison, reflects how our relationship has matured through mutual respect for each other's distinct visual expertise. "We have something to show you," the twins announce as we reach the exhibition's final gallery. They guide me toward a wall that had been covered during my earlier visits, now revealed to display a special addition to the exhibition, a photographic project titled The Photographer Visible, created by Sophia with Olivia's assistance. The series consists of behind-the-scenes documentation of me working over the past 3 years, setting up complex reflective arrangements, interviewing subjects, adjusting lighting, reviewing images on my computer. In each photograph, I am fully present rather than partially reflected, my concentration and creative engagement evident in every frame. "We realized there was something missing from this retrospective," Sophia explains, watching my reaction. "Images of you actually creating the work, the artist herself visible, not just her reflection." "We've been collecting these for years," Olivia adds. "Every time we accompanied you on shoots or visited your studio, the museum director agreed to include them as a special addition to the exhibition. The thoughtfulness of their project brings unexpected tears to my eyes. In documenting me at work, focused, engaged, creating, they have completed the circle of visibility that began with my small acts of hidden rebellion. I am no longer inserting myself into the frame through reflection. I am being deliberately included, my creative presence directly acknowledged and celebrated. This is the most meaningful gift you could have given me, I tell them, embracing them both. Seeing me as I am, not just as a grandmother, but as an artist with purpose and vision. That's what your work taught us to do, Sophia responds. To really see people, especially those society tends to make invisible. As we continue through the exhibition, Isabella joins me, linking her arm through mine in the comfortable way we've developed over the past 2 years. You know what I love about this whole story? She muses, gesturing toward the galleries we've just explored. The perfect cosmic justice of it all. They didn't want you in their perfect family photos because you didn't fit their aesthetic. And now your face is in hundreds of photographs in a museum exhibition that thousands of people will see. Her observation makes me laugh with its concise summary of the journey's irony. From excluded to featured. From invisible to inescapable. Exactly, she nods. And it happened precisely because you refused to disappear, because you found a way to insert yourself back into the frame on your own terms. At 7 o'clock, the public reception begins. The museum quickly fills with local community members, university faculty, art collectors, and media representatives. I find myself continuously engaged in conversations about the work, its technical aspects, conceptual foundation, and cultural significance. What I find most compelling about your trajectory, comments a curator from a major city museum, is how personal experience transformed into universal exploration. You've created a body of work that speaks to broad cultural patterns of visibility and erasure while maintaining intimate, specific perspective. As the evening progresses, I'm approached by numerous older women who share their own experiences of becoming invisible with age, in professional settings, healthcare environments, public spaces, and family dynamics. Your work makes me feel seen in a way that's hard to articulate, one woman in her 80s tells me, her eyes bright with emotion. Not just represented, but understood in the experience of gradual erasure. These connections, the recognition that my personal artistic journey has resonated with others experiencing similar patterns of invisibility, feel more meaningful than the professional accolades or critical recognition. I had begun this work to make myself visible. Its evolution into making others feel seen represents its most significant achievement. Midway through the reception, the museum director calls for attention and invites me to speak briefly about the exhibition. Standing before the gathered crowd, family, friends, colleagues, strangers, I find myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey from exclusion to celebration. 3 years ago, I discovered I was being deliberately excluded from family photographs because I didn't fit a particular aesthetic vision. I begin, deciding honesty serves the moment better than polite evasion. At 73, I was deemed visually inconvenient, my silver hair, comfortable clothing, and visible age markers unwelcome in carefully curated images. I pause, noticing Elise's slight discomfort, but also her steady gaze, accepting responsibility for past actions rather than denying them. That exclusion hurt deeply, I continue. But it also sparked a question that has driven my work since. Who determines visibility? Who controls the frame and decides which faces are welcome within it? Who benefits when certain people, particularly older women, are removed from the visual record? The room remains attentively silent as I gesture toward the galleries surrounding us. The work you see here represents my evolving response to those questions. From hiding my reflection in photographs as a form of quiet rebellion to creating complex visual statements about collective female presence across generations. From inserting myself into the frame to expanding the frame itself to include those traditionally rendered invisible. I look directly at my family, now standing together near the gallery entrance. I'm profoundly grateful that what began as personal hurt evolved into artistic purpose, and that family dynamics that once excluded me have transformed into relationships of mutual respect and support. The journey from invisibility to presence has been not just artistic, but personal. A reclaiming of my right to remain visible and valued in all aspects of my life. The reception continues for another hour, with conversations flowing between galleries as attendees engage with different aspects of the exhibition. By the time the last guests depart, I find myself physically exhausted but emotionally fulfilled in a way that transcends ordinary satisfaction. My family waits as the museum staff completes final closing procedures, then suggests we continue. The celebration at Michael and Elise's home, the very place where I had discovered my exclusion from the family portrait 3 years earlier. We have a small gathering planned, Michael explains. Just family and a few close friends. Nothing elaborate, but we wanted to extend the evening's celebration. As we drive toward their home, I find myself thinking about the family photographs that now line their walls. A mixture of casual, authentic images I've taken at various gatherings over the past 3 years, alongside the occasional professionally staged portraits that Elise still arranges for specific purposes. The visual narrative has become more inclusive, more complete in its representation of our family in all its imperfect, intergenerational reality. When we arrive, I'm surprised to find the house transformed with flowers, champagne, and a display of enlarged photographs documenting my artistic journey from the community exhibition through the museum retrospective. Martha is there, along with several close friends from Millbrook and colleagues from the arts community. We wanted to celebrate how far you've come, Michael explains as he guides me through the gathering. From being excluded from photographs, in this very room to having your work celebrated in museums. The gesture is particularly meaningful coming in this space, the site of the original wound now transformed into a place of celebration. As I move through the gathering, accepting congratulations and sharing stories of the exhibition development, I find myself standing before the fireplace where that excluding family portrait had once hung. In its place now is a large, beautifully framed photograph taken by Sophia during the New Mexico residency. It shows me at work, camera in hand, my expression intensely focused as I arrange a complex series of reflective surfaces for a portrait session. My silver hair catches the southwestern light, my comfortable clothing suited perfectly to the creative work I'm engaged in, my age evident in the lines of my face, but irrelevant to the artistic purpose driving my actions. Below this central image is a series of smaller photographs documenting family gatherings over the past 3 years. Casual, authentic moments with me visibly present among children, grandchildren, and in-laws. Not hidden in reflections but centrally included, my presence acknowledged as essential to the complete family narrative. We wanted you to see what we see now, Elise says quietly, joining me before the display. Not just an artist whose work has gained recognition, but a mother and grandmother whose presence matters to our family's complete story. The simple acknowledgement, "Your presence matters," represents the most profound transformation of the past 3 years. Not just artistic, validation, or professional respect, but recognition of my essential place within the family narrative, visual and otherwise. "Thank you," I respond, genuinely moved by the gesture. "This means more than the museum exhibition in many ways." Elise nods, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what your work is really about," she says. "Beyond the technical approach or conceptual framework, it's about the right to remain visible as we age, to maintain presence rather than acceptance of erasure." "Exactly," I affirm, surprised and pleased by her insight. About refusing the invisibility that society often imposes on aging women. "Your work made me see my own biases," she admits. "How I had internalized certain aesthetic values that prioritized youthful appearance over authentic presence, perfect visuals over meaningful inclusion. It's changed how I approach both professional and personal documentation." This acknowledgement, specific and self-aware rather than generically apologetic, feels like the completion of a circle that began with my exclusion from her carefully curated family portraits. Not perfect reconciliation, but genuine growth in understanding on both our parts. As the evening continues, I find myself sitting on the patio with Martha, watching through the windows as family and friends mingle inside. The contrast between this moment of inclusion and celebration and those early days of hurt and exclusion feels almost dreamlike in its completeness. If someone had told you 3 years ago that your exclusion from family photos would lead to a museum retrospective, artistic partnership, and transformed family relationships, would you have believed them? Martha asks, always direct in her Observations. Not for a moment, I laugh. I was just a hurt grandmother trying to assert my right to exist in the family's visual narrative. Everything that followed has exceeded my wildest expectations. Because you transformed rejection into creative purpose, Martha observes. You didn't just react with hurt or anger, you responded with creative imagination. You made yourself visible in ways no one could have anticipated. Her insight crystallizes the core lesson of this extraordinary journey, that invisibility need not be accepted as inevitable, that creative response to exclusion can open unexpected paths to new forms of presence and recognition. Later that night, after returning home with Isabella, I find myself unable to sleep despite the day's exhaustion. I move to my study, where photographs from various projects line the walls alongside exhibition announcements, press clippings, and personal mementos of this unexpected late-life artistic journey. On my desk sits the original beach day photographs, those first experimental images where I captured my reflection in the lake's surface, car chrome and pavilion windows while the family participated in their professional photo session without me. Looking at them now, I'm struck by how technically unsophisticated they appear compared to my recent work. How the concept was present but the execution still developing. Yet these simple images contain the seed of everything that followed, the initial refusal to accept erasure, the creative determination to remain present even when excluded, the beginning of an artistic voice that would eventually speak to universal experiences of visibility and value. Beside these early experiments sits the Museum Exhibition Catalog, ADE, beautifully produced hardcover volume documenting the complete artistic journey from those first reflections to the complex multi-generational portraits of my recent work. The scholarly essays contextualizing my photography within contemporary discussions of aging, gender, and representation still seem somewhat surreal, as though they're describing someone else's work rather than my own. The contrast between beginning and current, reality encapsulates the extraordinary transformation of the past 3 years, from excluded grandmother to recognized artist, from hurt family member to respected creative voice, from invisibility to presence on my own terms. Isabella joins, me, wrapping a shawl around my shoulders against the night's chill. Can't sleep? Understandable after such a momentous day. I'm just marveling at how completely things have changed, I tell her, gesturing toward the contrasting images. From hiding my reflection in beach photos to having my work analyzed in museum catalogs. She studies the visual evidence of my journey, her artist's eye appreciating both technical evolution and conceptual development. The irony is perfect, isn't it? They didn't want you visible in their perfectly curated family portraits, and now your face is visible in galleries and museums across 3 states. And in every photograph I've taken since, I add, thinking of the consistent technique I've maintained throughout this artistic journey, the photographer's presence acknowledged through reflection regardless of the primary subject. You know, what's most powerful about your story? Isabella muses. It's not just about artistic success or professional recognition. It's about refusing invisibility in every aspect of life, creative, familial, social, cultural. About claiming the right to remain seen and valued despite society's expectations that aging women should gracefully disappear. Her observation touches the core truth of this journey, that making oneself visible requires continuous assertion across multiple contexts, that presence must be claimed rather than waiting for permission to remain in the frame. As dawn approaches, we move to the porch swing that has witnessed so many transitions in my life, from raising children to mourning Gregory, from discovering my exclusion from family photographs to planning international exhibitions. The lake glimmers in early morning light, its surface both reflecting the sky and revealing depths beneath, not unlike the photographic approach that has defined my late-life artistic identity. What comes next? Isabella asks, her hand warm in mine. After such a definitive retrospective at 76? The question contains no assumption of conclusion or retirement, No expectation that a museum exhibition represents culmination rather than continuation. Her perspective, shaped by her own late-life artistic flourishing, assumes ongoing creativity rather than neat narrative closure. "I've been thinking about a new series," I tell her, sharing an idea that has been forming during the exhibition preparations. Moving beyond reflection to explore different forms of presence and absence, shadow, imprint, trace. Ways we leave evidence of existence even when physically removed from the frame. Isabella nods with immediate understanding. The persistence of presence despite physical absence. That could be powerful, especially as we consider our own mortality and legacy. The conversation turns toward artistic possibilities rather than philosophical abstractions, potential technical approaches, visual strategies, conceptual frameworks for exploring presence that persists beyond physical visibility. Even at 76, faced with inevitable limitations of aging, I find myself planning future creative explorations with the same enthusiasm that has characterized the past 3 years. As the sun rises fully over the lake, illuminating my porch, with golden morning light, I feel a profound sense of completion alongside continuing possibility. The journey from excluded grandmother to recognized artist has transformed not just my creative life, but my understanding of visibility itself, not as permission granted by others, but as presence claimed through continuous personal and artistic assertion. They didn't want me in the family photo, and that exclusion ultimately pushed me to create hundreds of images where my face appears in every frame, not by their permission, but by my creative determination. In refusing invisibility in that specific context, I discovered how to make myself and others like me visible in ways far more significant than I could have imagined. The museum retrospective represents not conclusion, but affirmation, evidence. That visibility can be reclaimed at any age. That creative voice can emerge from rejection rather than acceptance. And that remaining present in the frame, literally and metaphorically, is not just possible but necessary for those society expects to disappear. As Isabella and I watch the day brighten over the lake, I think of all the photographs yet to be created, all the forms of presence yet to be explored, all the ways visibility can be claimed rather than conferred. At 76, with 3 extraordinary years of artistic evolution behind me, I find myself looking forward rather than backward, planning new images where my face will continue to appear in every frame, not as rebellion, but as joyful assertion of continuing creative presence. The journey from exclusion to inclusion, from invisibility to presence, from rejection to recognition, has transformed not just my artistic life, but my understanding of aging itself, not as gradual erasure, but as opportunity for clearer voice, stronger perspective, and more determined visibility than ever before. They didn't want me in their carefully curated family portrait, but in pushing me out of their frame, they inadvertently helped me discover my own, one large enough to include not just my reflection but my complete presence, not just my family's visual history but cultural commentary on who deserves to remain visible, and not just my past, but my continuing creative future. In the end, the most powerful response to exclusion wasn't anger or withdrawal, but creative transformation, turning invisibility into its opposite through persistent artistic presence. They didn't want me in the family photo, so I made my face appear in every frame, and in doing so, changed not just how I am seen, but how aging women everywhere might claim their right to remain visible, valued, and creatively present regardless of who tries to remove them from the picture. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.